live. We are going live. And we're live. We are live. Yes. Family, come on in. Come on in. Send your text messages to all of your loved ones. Come on in. On now. On now. Sent one to my brother. There we go. Come on in. One person watching. Tonight we have a really great show. This is something that people are going to be using. You know, I heard some of the conversation that you had before we went live, and there is a little bit of a narrative shift with some of these pastors and stuff. And I know from some of the feedback that I get from people who watch the show that they rewatch these Tuesday talks and they share them with other people. And one person shared it with her pastor and was like, what is this? Like, put your hands like, what is this? Like,
right.
This is.
Right.
So welcome, Denise, Haywood, Ebony, Cheryl, Cheryl, Renault. Come on in. Watching from West Africa. Thank you. Come on in. We have Sanette Yeshiria Sakina Ra, who is an initiate. And for those of you who follow the Shrine of Ma'at and who participate in our events, we are having our Heb Keperuwer, which is like graduation, if you will, for our initiates on June 11th in Central Park at the Dana Discovery Center at 12 p.m. At 12 p.m. Uncle Ma'at family, come on in. Woo, y'all came in fast. I looked up and here we are at 40 pretty much. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for Tuesday Talk. This is the third of the last three that we are going to have for this season, and we will begin in September. Please DM me with any people and or suggestions of ideas that you would like for me to have on Tuesday Talk coming up in the fall, and I will do my best and make no promises that I can get these people on or these topics from others. So I just want to say thank you for joining us. And tonight we have Sen Garrick. He is a fully initiated member of the Shrine of Ma'at. He and his wife, which is always lovely and amazing when you can see that divine feminine and divine masculine as a couple working together. What also makes them special is that they used to be in the past tense Christian pastors, not pastors, pastors.
Right.
They were just pastors, y'all. They morphed into people.
Right.
Christian pastors. And so I know that was funny. And so now they are practicing Kemetic spirituality, which is African spiritual system. So this is somewhat of a hot topic or a relevant topic as we have social media that is really telling everybody's business, right?
Thanks.
You know what I'm saying? All of the business for pretty much any topic you want to learn about. And there's just like this explosion of information that we've been able to have access to. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sen Garrick onto the show. Welcome, Sen Garrick. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Anke Mai to use Abu Shashet and Anke Mai to the family. I'm so honored to be on Tuesday Talk. Hey, I feel like I'm in the big leagues now because the heavy hitters you have on here, you know, you know, when I can catch it. I just want to say to you, you're doing a phenomenal job with the Tuesday Talks.
Thank you.
They are very not only informative, but they are life changing. And I know that individuals that are sharing these, you know, you can't help either. It's going to either further drive your head in the sand, or you're going to do the research and open up your eyes and your mind and your heart to say, hey, you know, especially if it may be challenging your stable of belief, right. You know, what is this being discussed? So again, you know, you're doing a marvelous job with the Tuesday Talks, and we really appreciate and very grateful for you doing this.
Thank you. I really appreciate that so much. I really do. And as you guys have heard me say before, one of the reasons I started Tuesday Talk was because I wanted to meet the elders. And I used to harass Jabari, have the elders at your house, have the elders at your house all the time. And so when Corona hit, I was like, we about to just be on Tuesday Talk. I'm gonna meet them whether or not, whatever. And then you have them on the show, and you're going to get knowledge, but the vast, the breadth and the depth and the synergistic information is something that I had not counted on. So I'm learning, as well. So I'm also grateful for the guests that we have on. So, Sin Garrett, can you take us back to little baby Garrett? And in your household, what type of religious or spiritual environment was that for you?
Well, from when I can remember, when I was young, I grew up a traditional Pentecostal background. I was the youngest of 5 children in a single parent home. So we were very heavily influenced with, our Christian heritage and the legacy that was given to us, if I can say it that way, and pretty much kind of shaped, your thinking, and as how you see peoples in the world growing up. Of course, I went through my rebellious stages of not wanting to have nothing to do with the church, and didn't go to church, and I went through that period, and then until I got saved, and began to have a walk with God and relationship with Christ and all of the jargon that goes along with it. So, and that was about age 19, 20, when I quote unquote surrendered my life. It's funny just kind of hearing those terms that you say them as with the understanding that I have now.
Right.
But and essentially from there, grew up, got involved in the ministry. At about age 20, 21, did some seminarial training, and I think it was about age 24, 25, got my ordination as a minister, and then later on, then I got ordained as an elder, and that was under a different Pentecostal movement. And shortly there, at about 2010, Lisa and I were promoted to pastors, and so we started our own ministry out here in Arizona. And it was, because it was early and grassroots, trying to get everything going. That was the initial thought processes of, getting everything in order, getting your foundational statements and all of that together as to what the identity of the church would be, who we will be, how we would perform it, how we would do it. But we left to Alabama in about 2010, stayed there for about 4 years, was directly under he was the chief apostle of that organization. And he was more progressive in his thinking, which I think, as Lisa and I would talk about it, that we think that was the genesis of our awakening in consciousness, because he was very progressive. He was a reader, so he would challenge you to read other material outside of the Bible.
Interesting.
And various personal conversations that we would have with him was kind of like the spark, like, you don't think the traditional way as a lot of other pastors think. And of course, he was more into the sciences and things of that nature. So that kind of pushed us to kind of open up and expand our thinking in terms of, even just in the church setting, various things that he would say to us and kind of kick to us. And we'd be like, wait a minute. Because I remember he said something before about, everything in red, Christ didn't say that. And he's like, wait a minute. Of course, if you're a traditional Bible believer, you took that as gospel. Everything in red is what Christ said.
Jesus said that.
And he told us, he said, no, everything in that he didn't say. And we was like, wait a minute. And so that was the type of conversations we would have. And so when we left there and came back, got ready to really get back into the ministry mindset and work and things of that nature. And all of a sudden, I reconnected with a gentleman that I met here back in 2010. We were, developing a friendship as pastors and what have you. So when we came back, reconnected, and we got to talking and just kind of reminiscing, and lo and behold, he converted to become a Hebrew Israelite. And so, after having that dialogue and conversation with him, I was already having my issues and questionings with the Christian practice and what have you. And as we got in dialogue, it was his approach for me that really, it turned me off, number one. And number two, because I don't just take what you say for face value. I'm gonna go research it myself. So I said, let me research some of this that you're saying, because a lot of it I was not familiar with, and then some of the information I was, but once you started getting into some of the historical aspects, I wasn't that quite abreast to it. So I said, let me research that, and I'll come back to you and I'll talk. We'll have a conversation. So as I got to searching, and I'm listening to all these videos, and I'm hearing them, they doing all this hollering and screaming and yelling at folks on the corner, until I came across one video. It was on Sinai's channel, and I think it was AOC, where Hashar, one of the Hebrew Israelites, I think at the time he was debating. It was either Polite or it was another Hebrew that was debating. General Seti, and it was I want to more so say it was Seti, because it was something that he said that really just kind of triggered it for me when he talked about the story of Noah, and he went into explaining about, we talked about the historicity of the story of Noah, when its placement in the archives of about 22 to 2300 BCE. Supposedly the story took place, and his question was that if, according to the narrative, the biblical narrative, if that wiped out all human life, and that's the idea that we're taught, that at the flood of Noah was basically the reset, and it wiped out all human life, where it just only left 8 souls, and only men are mentioned, no women. It just mentions their wives. So that, that's a whole nother conversation. And then the question Seti posed, he said, now, if it wiped out all life in that period, then why was no break in the lines in the kings of the valley? And I said, whoa, wait a minute. With my Christian thinking at the time, I'm just like, wait a minute. So I got to researching that, and I'm like, bro,
I never even thought of that.
I was like, wait a minute, that's true. I mean, if we're talking about all human life has been wiped out in that period, why was there no break in the lines of the kings of the valley? And that, when I heard that, I was done.
So that was like the pinnacle of you not believing.
Absolutely. I couldn't trust the credulity of the text in that regard, because you're passing this as history,
right?
And I'm basing my entire life on this,
right.
And so in doing so, you just start to now you start to question. Now, it wasn't that I necessarily had a question in the terms of divine essence or life, but as God is defined as we know it, that's where I started having a question. And so, and then shortly after that, I saw this brother on Sinai's channel, and I was just not only, it wasn't only how he was articulating the history, but it was the spirit that drew me.
Jabari.
It was Jabari. And and just the way he was laying out the history and the And even in debate format, I'm listening to this, I'm like, this brother is sharp. And of course, it intrigued me the more because of just the history and the research and how he was just lining it up chronologically,
right,
and just mowing them down. I'm like, y'all can't hold a candle to this dude. And I was trying to figure out who this brother was.
right.
And so and I'm trying to remember how I think when he put it out there, him and Anika put it out there about initiating, becoming an initiate on with the Shrine of Ma'at. So of course within this, Lisa and I were kind of having our dialogue, because as I was transitioning, she was transitioning, but what took her over is that when we lost our grandson, and that was the thing that did it for her, because her concept was, she's right there in the hospital as our daughter is, giving birth. And, we were hearing, there may be some complications, what have you. And so immediately, we're praying and we're believing God that, hey, bring our grandson through. And when that didn't happen, it took her in a whole different direction.
Yeah.
And of course she was doing her own search. And, as we would have our conversations, she would ask me, because at the time, periodically, we were still going to church. And she would ask me, how are you sitting, listening to this with what you know? and I said, well, at that time, it was just kind of out of respect, because I was interested in engaging in who our pastor was at the time and who we were fellowshipping with, just to have a dialogue. But that never surfaced, because even just my questions that I was having about the text itself with various things, I'm sure he wasn't going to be ready for, nor will I have been looked at as someone who is just seeking, opposed to someone who is maybe being influenced by a demon or a devil. That's the party line that they go to,
right.
When you're beginning to challenge, the concepts of what you believe and why you believe it. And so when all of that just kind of started unraveling, like and it wasn't a, well, since I'm no longer doing this, what else will I do? And I like something I heard Dr. Hagen say on your program once before, and someone said, well, if I give it up, what will I turn to?
Right.
And he said, to the truth. I mean,
to the truth.
To the truth. I mean, what else is there? If you take that away, what will I turn to?
Right.
And so and I was like, wow, that was very profound. And that's what it was for me. It was a turn to truth and hearing the call of our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened, and I said, that's, it was, not only did it make sense to me, but it was answering a lot of questions that I had,
right,
and filling in a lot of the gaps and filling a lot of the holes that were like, just where as just functioning by faith, you don't need evidence of anything, and that's how you justify certain actions, and that's how you justify certain things that you do, because it's by faith. And
right.
And with that, you don't need explanation, because it's by faith.
Because it's by faith, yeah. And they challenge you to question things and to think critically. Now, I have a question.
Right.
I want to take it back to when you were in seminary school. Most people who I've spoken to who've been in seminary, they know the truth.
Yeah.
And when you ask them, they skirt around the issue and give you vague answers and never really answer any direct questions. And then you're having this conversation where you both know that you both know that you both know.
Mm-hmm.
You both know why he's not or she isn't going to come clean with giving the truth that y'all both know that y'all both know that y'all both know.
Right.
So when you were in seminary, what were you taught? Because it sounds like either you connected the dots or the awakening happened after you were in seminary. So what did you learn in seminary that wasn't really like this historical component an origin of Christianity, which so many people learn in seminary. They learn the truth in seminary.
Well, because some of the seminarial teachings or classes in schools, they're more so slanted to their organization. Okay. Meaning that if your organization believes a certain way, that's the way you're taught in seminary. So a lot of, because with all of the iterations that are within Christianity, you know, certain sects don't even believe what the other sects believe as well.
Can you give an example?
For example, the baptism. You have churches and organizations that believe it has to either be Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or you have organizations that believe it is to be in Jesus' name only. And if you don't baptize in Jesus' name only, then those who baptize in Father, Son, and Holy Ghost cannot be saved. And these are heated debates and arguments even to this day. Now you have some,
but these are people who know that it's myth, and they're gonna argue with all that flavor over myth.
Yes, ma'am.
See.
And then if you challenging them on the mythos of it, it's because it's so deep seated and ingrained in their reality. They will fight you tooth and nail. And now you have some organizations that are more progressive to say, we're not going to fight over that. You know, we believe in the common unity of receiving the Holy Spirit. So we can come together in that regard. But a lot of the disagreements and the arguments that they have over certain passages of scripture, you have some who believe in tithing, some that don't. Some just believe you just give. Some believe that no, you got to tithe. If you don't, you're gonna be cursed. This, that, and the third. And that was, for me, that was the tithing aspect was one of the things that I really had to challenge with, because I started looking at, well, one passage in the New Testament that talks about, well, you give cheerfully, you know, as from the heart, as a cheerful giver. You don't give under compulsion, and you don't give under duress. Basically, that's what it's saying. Meaning you don't force to give. You give willfully.
Right.
But then Old Testament, it's regulated that you had to give a certain percentage, period. Now it wasn't of money, it was of barley, wheat, grain, it was cattle or whatever. So you gave a tenth of either your livestock or whatever you yielded in your harvest.
Right.
So my question became, well, the result of tithing, because we're taught that if you give, you're going to get it back, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall men give into your bosom. So if you give what you have, it's going to come back to you either 100-fold or some other fold. Well, what I begin to question is, if the results of tithing was based upon me giving out of instruction in terms of a 10%, then it has nothing to do with my heart, the condition of my heart, according to the New Testament. Mm-hmm. But if I give according to the condition of my heart, then I'm not obligated to give a certain percentage. So which is it?
Right.
So then, but if I give according to a certain percentage, then according to how you teach it, then I'm supposed to, regardless of the condition of my heart, how I feel about it, I'm supposed to reap a harvest. Well, I started noticing as I'm giving, how to pay my bills, how to keep gas in my car, got to ask people for money after I've given unto the Lord. There's a problem here. So if that's the case, then if it's based upon one of those results, then it has to be 100% return based upon what's written. So meaning if I give a 10% or whatever, there has to be some type of return, it guaranteed. So if you take a poll, if you have 10 people who do that, and it only works for 5 folks, we got a problem. Either the text lying or we don't practice that.
Right.
And that was one of the issues that I started having. So when I stopped giving, and I'm starting to see, okay, well then, and again, and then see, this was a truth that I had to come to. It's a psychosis.
It is. The constant reminder of hell undergirds the fear that drives people to do what they do, which includes not thinking critically, and using common sense and abiding by the laws of nature. Now, let me be very clear for anybody who's watching this now or taped. I am not saying that Christians don't use common sense. Because you have enough common sense to get up and go to work or get up and run your business. You have enough common sense to pay your bills on time. You have enough common sense to do a lot of things that are based in common sense. But there's a fear in thinking critically about even the contradiction about the tithing that you just mentioned. There are contradictions throughout the Bible. There are 2 creation stories. There, when you look at what you said, there's no break in succession of the pharaohs. Yet, according to the Bible, everything was wiped out except for 8 human beings.
Right.
And here's another thing: with knowing these stories so disconnected from its root in Kemetic spiritual systems, even though I knew both, it wasn't until Garrick put those 2 together that I was like, yeah, here's another thing that doesn't make any chronological sense. If the Pharaoh's succession hasn't been broken, and you have this deluge of water that wiped out the earth, how both things have happened. So, in going forward, with you speaking to the pastor who you said he was progressive, what was his? It seems like and I don't know this man, but it seems like he knew the truth, but he was holding enough space so you could bump around in the padded room and figure it out yourself. Does that sound like that's kind of right or accurate?
That's very accurate. That's very accurate. And if I had a space where I could talk to him now, I would ask him, bro, why didn't you tell me this sooner?
Yeah.
Why did you? And then I get it. I kind of take it for what it is. You kind of led me in the right direction, even though what I'm finding out is that a lot of these leaders and pastors, and as you alluded to, they do know the truth, but for them, it's a business matter.
We're gonna talk about that at the end, because the business part makes me, because you selling out our ability for Black liberation for this immediate gain. We're gonna talk about them and their little business model at the end.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna be fired up, and we ain't gonna get past this. We're gonna do that at the end.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, for our listening audience, I would recommend there's one gentleman who's he was a prominent bishop at the time, and he went through a phase of expanded consciousness. He doesn't take the Bible literal, and if you listen to him and his approach, he tells it like it is, but they're upset with him because he's exposing all of the trade secrets. His name is Bishop Carlton Pearson, and he was a very prominent evangelical bishop in the early 90s, and had a lot of power and influence. And once he started challenging the concept of hell not being real, and to this day, he went through a lot. He's very learned. He's seminarial trained. He in Christian theology, history, historical studies, historicity, language, Greek, Hebrew, Latin. The brother's sharp.
Right.
Brother's sharp. And he challenges all of those concepts, those Christian practices, and the whole concept of salvation as to, well, according to this basically says that, that Jesus saved the whole world through his sacrifice. So if I'm beholden to that idea, then why am I excluding other people?
Right.
So that's his whole premise. So I would recommend anybody. He has a book. He has a book that's several years old, and just to kind of get the idea of the Christian mindset, the fundamental Christian, the fundamentalist Christian mindset. He would be a good read for that. And
I'm going to ask you that at the end, so we can circle back to that person, because it's good to see how there are other pastors who are coming out with the truth. And personally, I think that their conscience is getting to them. I think that the heat and the pressure and the revelation, because y'all, this is revelations, okay? Because if you look at the root of the word, a lot is being revealed. Part of it is on Tuesday Talk. We are living in the times of revelations where the information age is telling the truth on a lot. Okay. So, I've also had that feeling of, why didn't someone tell me this sooner? Because, I was quote unquote saved at 7 or 8. And some people on Tuesday Talk who's been here have heard me say this. And when I asked questions, I got the runaround. And the irony of it is this: I believed in the divine, and I still do. And I had no problem, even at 7, understanding that there is a power greater than us, that we are unable to understand. Your girl was sharp at 7 or 8. Now, had that other pastor that I asked that question to said, you know what, Sai, or Saeed, as everyone called me back then, I don't know, that's just from God's power, I would have believed him, and I would have kept it rolling. But the fact that he gave me the runaround, and I knew it, I knew that I'm like, he's lying to me. He's trying to keep something from me. And ever since that conversation, I just felt like everything was just this one big con game, and I was right. And I look back on the people who had to know the truth. I'm like, why did y'all not tell me this earlier? One thing I've come to understand, unfortunately, that's a part of the process. And I try to gauge what I think people can handle. Give them maybe like 2 slices more than they can handle, to push them forward. Because like, you can't be no grown Black person in 2022 thinking that somebody's going to come from the sky and save you from all of this and save you from hell. Like, doesn't that sound like a story to you? Does that not sound like a story to you? And even when I was a kid, I only believed Jesus was our Lord and Savior. And just like you said before, when you use certain words, you feel like, now that I know what I know, and I say Jesus was our Lord and Savior, it just sounds so weird coming out of my mouth.
That got a weird ring to it now, right?
The whole energy, the whole vibration is like, nah, son, I'm good. But anyway, I believe that he was our Lord and Savior. But you know what? I didn't believe anything else. Even as a child, as an 8-year-old, at the oldest, I didn't believe it was real, because it sounded like stories. I'm like, these are just stories. And I even said to someone, the theory of evolution is a theory. It's a human being's best guess. And I said, this creation story is a story modeled after a theory. I said, okay, that's good. Because I remember when I was first saved, I was like, what's the creation story? And they broke it down for me. And I was like, okay, well, these symbolize different steps these days. And it models the theory of evolution. That's a theory. This is a story. What else? I remember going over that. They didn't say anything when I said this is a story. But anyway, I just, sometimes I have to put to the side that there are grown folks our age who still believe these stories that I didn't believe at 8 years old. I don't know. And why didn't people tell me? I'm going to keep it real with you, Sen Garrick. Sometimes I get a little annoyed by that. Because I feel like, I'm saying, I wasted so much time trying to figure it out and find this information when other people knew it. Like, just tell people the truth, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, so you have this pastor who held space for you all. Was there any one part of a story where you like, you know what, this ain't even like, was there something that really made you just not believe anymore?
Not within the 4 walls of the church, but again, because he said something to us out of about a passage out of Hosea, I think it's chapter 3, that talks about God coming from Tema. And
what's Tema?
Tema is a location, according to the text. So it's using anthropomorphic language, describing God coming from a place. But he went as far as to say that not only that God had a father, and I'm like, wait a minute, bro. Okay.
God had a father, or Jesus had a father who was God?
No. He was saying God, creator, God, has a father. And I'm like, okay. So a lot of that, because he's taking it from that passage in Hosea. Hold on, let me find it. So he's taking it from that passage in Hosea that talks about that God coming from Tema. And so I was like, well, can you explain that? Because I'm hearing, not that I didn't hear that passage. I'm sorry, Habakkuk 3:3. And it talks about God coming from Tema. So that was his premise of saying that. So, but even now, as I'm learning within the Kemetic spirituality, when you start to see in truth the divine order, and the divine functioning and being defined in different attributes and aspects, and they're being named, I started putting the pieces together, where if you read passages in the Old Testament where the like Abraham and Israel or Judah, when they would call a certain thing that would happen or transpire in their life, and they would call this area, or they would call this thing Jehovah, and then they would add a name to it, like Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Tsidkenu, Jehovah Shalom, Jehovah Shammah, Jehovah Makadish. Basically, that was how they defined it, based upon a need that they had. So when that need got met, that's what they called it. So I started putting that together with one of the last teachings that Jabari was doing about, understanding the divine, and how, because you can't just blanket it to say the divine is God. No, because the divine is so vast, and that's how the ancestors were giving it a name to describe a certain action.
Right.
So, so they were doing the same thing. They saw the divine respond to them in a certain way, so they turned around and called it Jehovah. Now, mind you, Jehovah is not the name of the Most High that our Hebrew Israelite brothers call him. It's Yahweh, or some other names. Well, even if you go to El, we know El was a Canaanite god. So you have these vast names to what most Christian followers wouldn't even know that there are these other deities in the Old Testament who these Israelites were serving. So if you have you heard of Brother Divine Prospect?
Yeah, yes, but I don't know who he is. I wouldn't know what he looks like.
He was the one that I don't know if it was a conversation he was having with Jabari, because I anytime Jabari's on Sarnetta, I'm checking him out. So and I remember him having a conversation. I believe it was with him, and I think they were in their home. I think it was Divine Prospect, Jabari, and I think it was Zion Lex. Well, they were having a conversation as to the worship of Yahweh, and that why do we see the practice of, or the function and movement of Yahweh either prohibited or in full function in other areas than we see him or functioning not in other areas. So how, so he was kind of, as far as explaining that, well, certain regions that they who served that particular God in that region, that God would be beholding to display themselves or function in a way where they could say, this is who this God is to them. So, for example, in the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel and him fighting against the god of Baal. well, his it's called the challenge at Mount Carmel. Well, Elijah says, well, the God that answers by fire, that's who we will serve. So you build, he tells the people of who serve Baal, you build an altar and we build an altar. And then the God that answers by fire, that's who God is. So they build this altar and they're doing their ritualistic call and whatever. Elijah builds his altar and his sacrifice is consumed by fire. Well, they're trying to figure out, well, why didn't, when they called their God, he didn't move on their behalf, but when Elijah called on his God, he moved on his behalf. Well, the point he was making was that, well, because of the region they were in, their Baal God was not going to respond anyway. So he breaks all of that down, and that intrigued me the more in terms of they have a following suit to a lot of the Kemetic connections that you see in the Old Testament and that you definitely see in New Testament, and those practices where they wouldn't admit it to this degree that they have a lot of similarities in terms of seeing Yahweh or God functioning in different manners, and you're naming that manner in which he functioned. Mm-hmm. You see the same practice in Kemet.
Right.
You see the same practice in Kemet where you can see where the parallel is drawn to that. So, I mean, for me, you know, when he started sharing with us things like that, that's really what started to drive me more and more. Like, okay, I'm seeking other material, and asking him certain questions. But it wasn't until when we got back here to Arizona, that's when the lid blew off.
So, are you still in touch with this man?
No, we haven't been in touch for years.
Okay. Was it an amicable disconnect or?
Most cases, no. And I say it that way because, and again, this is, and I can be completely transparent in this regard, because this is a lot of things that what turns people off in their religious practices, especially internally. Once you start getting into the inner workings, you really start to see how things function, and you get they had the nerve to accuse us of stealing from the church. And mind you, we were one of the avid supporters financially. Furthermore, I'll share this. At the time when we moved out to Alabama, we found ourselves end up being homeless, which was a complete. It was just devastating to go through that. Well, the assistance and the help we got didn't come from the church I was a part of. The assistance and the help we were getting would come from white folk, not from the church that I was a part of. And one of the members who we were in pretty good relationship with, her husband did our taxes. And when he saw the amount that we were giving juxtaposed to where we were stationary in life, he couldn't believe it. And his question was, how could they be giving like this and they're dealing with what they're dealing with? See, I'm going and I'm using some nice terms because I'm gonna keep it clean.
Right.
The mind job that is done to individuals, and when you decide to that, you know, you're not gonna play the woolly anymore.
Right.
Then that's where things start breaking down, and then you get accused of stuff, and then they try to, you know, they almost they act like Tom Who's in blackface.
Yep.
Because the first thing that they want to do is try to discredit you.
Yep.
Because they know how dangerous you can be because you know the truth.
So,
and that's with inner workings that are going on. And so it was like, no, I can't do this.
so
Not
this
anymore.
Health space for your growth gave you like prompts and pushed you in certain directions or led you in certain directions to get to the truth. And then you get to a certain level of truth, and then they want to flip the script and accuse you of things that you didn't do.
Exactly. And that, you know, part of me was hurt because of our commitment.
Right. Yep.
And our innocence and our devotion.
Right. Yep. And the vulnerability of handing the pathway of salvation for your soul over to people, only to find out it's basically a spiritual Ponzi scheme.
You hit the nail on the head.
Now, I want to say this. My opinion is my opinion as a Boots shot. It is not the opinion of Anika or Jabari or the Shrine of Ma'at, because since we are not a religion and not a cult, we're not mandated to ingest dogma and then spit it out. So that's my disclaimer. I personally, one of the immediate elements that really turned me off was this: if you don't, then there's hell.
Right.
If you don't, then there's this. If you have sex before marriage, no man will want you. If you don't wear your skirt below your knees and it's a full skirt, then you're going to be seen as impure. There are all of these rules that it's so easy to go to hell. It's so easy to be undesirable. It's so easy to be wrong. And with and the people's telling you these things have no real accountability in terms of when they get caught in lies. All they do is just stand in front of the congregation, cry and ask for forgiveness, and everything is all good. And so when you're thinking about how there's no conviction, meaning your spirit, your religion is not driving your morality, because if it drove your morality, there's certain things you wouldn't do, like, oh, I don't know, slavery, maybe, enslavement. Hello, your religion is not strong enough to drive your morals enough to not create and instill a system of torture for centuries.
Right.
So when you ask that question, even with Black Christians, it is silent. They be the main one silent. And it is just this manipulative lie. And when that pastor lied to me at 8, Garrick, I'm telling you, the seed never really quite got deep in there. Not enough. But I will tell you this. Over time, I, questioned this because it didn't make any sense. And I was just like, this is all just a story. And I really didn't know what the origin of it was. I knew that it wasn't theirs because it just felt created. It felt made up. I knew, so I didn't know where to turn in terms of finding the information. I met Anika in 2010. Long story short, I was playing third wheel with Anika and Jabari at an event. We left, and in the car, Jabari says, in his Jabari way, there's reason to believe and evidence to believe that Jesus Christ did not exist as Christ, as a human. He said it in a very nice, simple way. And so, Jabari. And so I said, because here's a boots a shot. Are you saying Jesus Christ did not exist? Like, I want a yes, no. I'm gonna ask you a yes, no question, because I want a yes, no answer. Even when I was a little kid, either it's over here or it's over here. Don't be trying to, you break dancing in the middle. It's here or it's here. pop lock on them, right? One to the other.
Right.
Anyway, so he was like, yes. And I'm like, so Jesus does not exist. He was like, yes. So now I'm thinking to myself, if there's no Jesus, there's no hell. And so, but I had a moment where I had to tell myself, it's okay to believe that Jesus isn't real because there's no hell. Even when I knew the truth, I still had to say to myself, it's safe to like not believe that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm gonna give you an example. Quick story. I'm allergic to tree nuts. The only tree nut I can eat is almonds. Peanuts are legumes, they're not tree nuts. So not I can eat peanuts, but they're not really nuts. I think that the reason that I can eat almonds is because as a kid, my auntie used to feed me and my cousins and I honey nut Cheerios. And I think that low dose of almonds over the years, I built up some kind of acceptance for it and I could eat almonds. So one day I'm running in and out of Whole Foods getting a snack. And there was this one little bar that I used to love. And I would read the ingredients because I was in a rush at this point in my schedule during the day. And I'm eating this sports bar or meal replacement, whatever it is, right? So one day I actually take the time to read the ingredients. Guess what's in there? Almonds.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, I've been eating these almonds this whole time. Because after a while, I stopped reading the package because I already read it. And I'm grabbing it and I'm eating it. So then I say to myself, Sky, you can eat almonds because you've been eating them. You had no reaction. Trust me, when I eat nuts, my eyes are like this. My lips get so big, my mouth can't close. My face looks like Mike Tyson punched me in the face. It's a mess.
Wow.
So there's no confusion on if I ate a nut or not. We ain't thinking about nothing. My face has exploded. So anyway, so I'm like, wow, Sai, you can eat nuts or almonds. So one day I go and buy some almonds. And because I had told myself for decades that I cannot eat nuts, I was afraid to eat those almonds. But even though I knew I had been eating them with no reaction, but because your girl is logical and I'm not going to be nobody's fool, not on purpose at least, I ate the almond. I'm like, girl, you can eat you've been eating them.
Right.
Put it in your mouth, girl. Eat the almonds. So I eat the almond. I'm eating it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm eating almonds. Oh my God, I'm eating almonds. Oh my God. That like jump from, oh my God, I've been eating almonds to you can eat almonds. That part is like kind of a mistake or it just happenstance, right? The conscious choice to jump from I can eat almonds to I am eating almonds, consciously eating almonds. That's where a lot of our people are. Right. Everybody out here ain't believing all of this stuff. You can't believe it because you don't want to speak the truth about enslavement. You over there getting your boogie on with your man. Y'all not married. I saw you in the club with me. You got on a tight dress. I do too. You drinking. You doing all the stuff you ain't supposed to be doing. You cannot believe what you say you believe based upon your actions. You ain't out here doing nothing wrong. You ain't out here killing folks, stealing puppies. I'm not saying you're doing that. But again, the conviction of your belief is not your morals to exhibit certain behavior. Everybody out here I don't believe everybody out here believes it because the behavior avoids the instructions of what they're supposed to be doing. And also, when you corner a Black Christian and you ask them questions, they be bobbing and weaving. They be like Muhammad Ali out here because they know that they can't answer the questions logically. And very rarely do I get that's the divine power of God or anything close to that in Christian jargon. I don't get that. They just say this is where you have to have faith. And I say, no, that's where I said, you need faith. I need facts. And when they fall back on this faith, it's because that's what they've been told to say.
Right.
As opposed to, you know what, Sai? I don't even know. If you're really looking at something critically, you'll acknowledge when there's something that you do not know. Just like I didn't put together the no break in the succession of the pharaohs and the flood. How can they have both existed on the planet at the same time, especially when there's no evidence of a flood? Not that particular flood.
Not that particular, right.
That was special, not that particular flood. So let me ask you this question. When did you say to yourself, as a pastor, now that I know this truth, what am I going to do? Because I can't keep teaching this or holding space for this. When, first of all, you know how it felt when people were holding that space for you, and now you holding that same space. Tell me about what's going on in the mind at that point.
Wow. Now, for me, like I said, I think with the pastor that we were under when we were in Alabama, I think that was some conditioning groundwork that was prepping me and preparing me for this transition, because it was at the point, the first one of the first few points that I was listening to, especially because I used to try to defend the idea of that Jesus was not Barabbas. You should see my failed attempt at trying to refute that, and my scholastic attempt to disprove that, and that was just prior to when I was listening to SETI, and I can't remember who he was debating. When I heard that point, and that was the kicker for me. But before that, I didn't necessarily experience a lot of the cognitive dissonance that some people do experience, because they were trying to figure out, well, what the heck am I going to do now?
Right.
Now that I don't believe this anymore, for me and Lisa, it was a huge weight lifted off of us.
Yes,
because
it is.
because as a pastor, you're and again, and I'm with you with your disclaimer earlier. I'm not labeling every pastor like this, every church like this. There are some good functioning churches and leaders, but they're just wrong. There's no sour way to put that. It's just you're sincerely wrong.
I have a much more stern perspective on them.
They're
liars, and they're stealing from people. They know the truth and they're not telling the truth. That's a lie. And it's critical and crucial, because that is a part of what's keeping us as Pan-African Black people in a spell, in a, not a sports word, in a daze, just a dim type of mental clarity. And that is what's driving that. It is one of the major obstacles in our true and complete Black liberation. Mm-hmm. Because if you see anything other than yourself as your own savior, then you're not looking to yourself to be saved. You're looking outward.
Yes.
You're looking at the person who looks like the police officer who has a more probability of shooting you. You're looking at this, this Santa Claus who's going to bring you all of your happiness. You're looking at this white woman who's your beauty standard and who you should marry and give birth to, and all of this. And this again, my opinion, this is my opinion. And that is a significant tool of keeping us in a slumber, a congested way of thinking. It's like trying to breathe with pneumonia. You're congested, and there's something holding you down that's preventing you from breathing clearly and thinking clearly and critically and relying on yourself in a way that is different than when you're relying on a savior to come and save you and get you out of this. Yeah. So, and again, my opinion. And I also want to say this for anybody who's watching who is still Christian. People who are Christian, who go to church, just like you were saying earlier, you go with you're genuine. There's a certain level of vulnerability that I had mentioned. You're trying to do the right thing. You want to connect to the divine in the way that you feel is the most sincere. I don't question them. I don't have a problem with them, except for the critical thinking when you want to have a conversation and once all of the biblical facts run out, like facts can run out, right? Then you just have faith, and then that's the end of that. That doesn't make any scientific sense. So it was separate from that component of the responses you get from Black Christians. I don't blame them and don't really have a problem with them because they're not doing this out of from a position of knowledge and ignoring the knowledge and saying something completely different than what they know them. They're not holding secrets.
Right.
They're not withholding information. These leaders are. There's this one person, and I'm gonna disguise it because I'm not trying to out anybody, but she's this. I was at an event and she was officiating the event. And it was at a church. And my friend and I were sitting next to each other, trying not to roll our eyes that much. I had my ankh and I had my secret symbol earrings. And, we sitting up here like, oh my goodness, we whatever. And I knew that this particular officiate knew the truth. So I knew that this person was lying. And I was conscious of telling myself, you don't be rolling your eyes. Like, make sure I was doing a body check, don't have no attitude, because I don't want to be disrespectful, because I don't have to be there. Because I put somebody out my spot. If you come up in here with an attitude, you can't go no place else with an attitude either. So I was always aware, and I look nice and pleasant on the outside. Anyway, later on, our paths crossed again, and we were talking off the record. I browbeat this woman like the 2010 Lakers. I think it was the 2010 Lakers when we beat the brakes off the Celtics. Was it that?
Yeah, that was 2010.
That's what your girl was doing, because I knew she knew. And I was a little more assertive now. I have finessed my game like Jason Kidd with The Rock. But back then, I was beating the brakes off of people. And I was like, stop lying to me, girl. We both know the truth. You know the truth. I know the truth. You both know the truth. And eventually, she admitted it. So after we, that, whole brake beating thing, why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And her response was basically, people aren't necessarily ready for this information. Who are you to decide who's ready?
Right. Exactly.
Who are you to decide who's ready? The people who aren't ready are going to deny it and keep on moving forward because they don't believe it as it is all the way. I believe.
Anyway, right.
Thank you. Anyway, they don't even believe it all the way anyway. They just trying not to go to hell. That fear of hell is what if you told them the truth about hell, you got hell on earth for Black people here. Come on.
Yeah, and that whole concept, and see that was the reason why they, that pastor I mentioned earlier, who said that he no longer believed in hell and what have you. He was excommunicated. He's been called a heretic because of his new stance. That was the one thing, and he said it's interesting because it's almost like people are so beholding to the concept and idea of hell that you almost worship it. In other words, your Christianity doesn't exist without that hell.
Oh, so it's like worshiping hell.
It's almost a devotion to it, because you have to have it in order to justify your means of your thinking about the concept of what you believe and why you believe it.
Yeah.
In an event to avoid to avoid from going to hell.
Mm. And in that regard, hell has more power than God.
Yes.
Because why can't you just, like you said before, if Jesus died for everybody and saved everybody's sins, why isn't that enough to save you from hell? You're still scared of hell. You're more afraid of hell than you believe in the power of Jesus. Because if Jesus saved our souls, there ain't nobody going to hell.
Right. And see, those are some of the contradictory passages, because if you Old Testament God and the peoples who served the children of Israel, they were not concerned about witnessing to other nations. Mm-hmm. If you understand the text, the Old Testament text, they were either instructed to wipe out other nations, take them as slaves, destroy either their cattle, men, keep the women to yourselves, and the children. Depending on what parcel of land that they were being guided to conquer. The whole concept of what you have now in terms of New Testament, where you witness to them, you're trying to get them saved. Israel wasn't concerned about that because they were the superior people. See, that whole mind job, I'll say it nicely that way, that that's being inundated in people. So when for some it's a slow burn to come out of it. I mean, I know there's still vestiges that I still deal with because of the programming. So that's why I have to have a steady diet of ascension, Sebite,
right,
personal reading, because it's an undoing of what has been done, and I'm kind of I'm kind of late to the party, but I'm glad I'm here anyway, because better yet, I'll say it this way: responding to the call. When you respond to it, it was your time to. And you remember there's a passage in the movie Matrix where Morpheus is telling Neo, there's at a certain age they don't even bother trying to wake people up because it's too dangerous. And unfortunately for some people who are so immersed and are deeply embedded in that, it's almost dangerous to try to wake them up, because now their whole world has been built upon this idea, and if you take that away from them, it's like, where am I going to go? Where what will I plunge into if I don't have that? And
I think there would be a lot of anger if I reached 60, 70 something years old, and or let's say my own age, and I find out the pastor that was my pastor when I was a child been lying to me this whole time. We fighting. I said it. You were taking my mama's money for how long, and you knew it wasn't the truth? What?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people would be hurt. They're going to feel like they've been played for a fool. They're going to feel like they were robbed, and pastors going to get beat down. That's what I think is going to happen, because I think this information is going to continue to get out. And I think that at a certain point, somebody who's lived their life the right way, in ma'akeru, in balance, in ma'at, and so let me say this. One of the things that I appreciate about Jabari and the balance between Jabari and Anika is that together they're going to give you a nice balanced message. And one of the things that is important is let our Christian families members know you are still living your life in balance. You, devoted Christian who believes earnestly and does your best to be a good person, that's the whole irony of it. They're living their life in balance. They're living their life primarily by Kemetic and African spiritual systems,
right,
and fundamentals and elements that we do, but we're doing it knowing that the origin of it is African. I really think that somebody's going to be really mad at a pastor or two and be like, you knew this the whole time, and you stood up there and lied for decades, and we done tithed, and you done told me all of these things. Meanwhile, you took this money, you did XYZ, all your kids went to college for free, and whatever. I just think that there's going to be some level of a pinnacle or a critical interlope. I don't know. There's a word for that. And there's going to be some kind of explosion.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, because because what's happening is you do have this awakening that's happening.
It's happening.
And especially now you have some pastors, you have some church leaders, you have some parishioners, because they don't quite want to let it go completely. They're having this Christ consciousness, or this Christ consciousness, or this consciousness movement, but they're trying to still keep it churchified, and keep it within the parameters of their belief system, because they don't want to go way out there in their consideration about it, because to do that, then that means you have to let this go. I mean, when I would hear Anika and Jabari's would tell I'm not telling you to denounce your belief, but just re-Africanize it. Understand where you got it from.
Yes.
Show the respect to the mothers and fathers, and stop playing the child that's trying to tell the parent what to do.
Right, like that. Period.
And see, for me, what was the other thing that was a driving point was we to believe the way traditionally, the way I believed, and growing up in that, because you have this quote unquote such a relationship and divine connection with God, it makes you arrogant. It does. It makes you so arrogant, because one, you think you know it all because you know God, even if you may not have all of the academic accoutrements. You just become arrogant. You think you all of that in a bag of chips, and the truth of the matter is that if you once you come across someone like a Jabari that can read your mail and read it.
Oh no. Okay.
You're gonna have some problems. That they're going to very lovingly, very respectfully, but very sternly at the same time. But depending on the energy that you come with,
right?
If you think you know it all, you're gonna get your mail read.
Basically.
And then don't try to come with this, this historical gymnastics. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work, especially yes, and again, because we know a little apologetics, and we know a little Hebrew, we know a little Greek, and we know some Koine Greek, and we know and we've read other texts and what have you. But we stayed away from the truth of, and the essence of, getting into the deep history and getting into the truth. Because like growing up and coming up in ministry, we were taught to stay away from books like the Coming Forth from Day to Night.
Oh.
You know why? Because we were told that's those are doctrines of devils. You don't read that. You stay away from that. Now that I'm reading it for myself, I see why you telling them to stay away from it. Because
they believed it was doctrines of the devil. The specific people who told you, not just in general, but specifically, do you think that they thought it was tools of the devil, or that they knew that it was the actual truth?
I think they thought it was tools of the devil, because I know how they were taught.
Okay.
They because they didn't know, because you see the spookism that the Europeans placed on our Kemetic spirituality, and the scare tactics, even King James himself, and I didn't know this. This is that bishop I was telling you about earlier. Because he believed in witches and warlocks, you see the influence in the King James Bible, in those texts that refer to that. You know why? Because he believed it. So you see a lot of that interwoven in some of the language in the text, because that was the influence from King James.
Mm.
Not necessarily because it was original text that was explaining it this way. Because any real pastor who knows it would tell you, we have copies of copies of copies of copies. We have no originals, so we cannot verify the legitimacy of the text. Any real seminarial taught pastor, if you back them in a corner and ask them in truth, they should be able to tell you that, because all we have are copies and copies. So we're relying on third and fourth handed information, generational information, because we have nothing original. And when we talked earlier, you asked me about some of the comparisons between Amenemope and the Book of Proverbs.
Right.
Well, if you read a lot of particular, because the scholars are pointing out, and you have some that argue, well, it's probable, questionable at best. But if you read, I think it's chapter 22, verse 17 through 24, verse 10, you'll see a lot of the similarities from the Book of Proverbs and the instructions of Amenemope, where you see a lot of some of the language, and you know what plagiarized documents are, and you've seen them, and I've seen them, and anyone who plagiarizes something, they may not word it exactly the way it's worded, but they'll take it and flip it, remix it, and then put it in a manner in which, so it won't come across that way.
Exactly.
Very simply put, that's what you see in the anthology of the Book of Proverbs, in these songs and poems and what have you. You see that. It was when I was looking at, like, and I think this is the minimum the first one, where it begins with "Beware of robbing the poor." Just that phrase alone, you would see in one of the passages of the Book of Proverbs, where it almost says it word for word, on how to not take from the poor, to rob the poor. Just certain phrases you see see the similarities, and where it's borrowed from. And so, for me, it's like, come on, because some of the passages, the Book of Proverbs is broken down into like six sections. Supposedly the first section might have been written later and composed later. So by the time you get to the third one, which is where you see a lot of the similarities with the instructions of Amenemope and the Book of Proverbs, and it's those type of things where you can't, if you're going to be honest as a pastor, as a leader, you're going to have to tell the congregants where it's coming from.
Period.
You can't get away from that. Or at best, if you're really concerned about your parishioners really learning and knowing the truth, you ought to read it to them, show them where the material is, and leave it to them to decide. Now, if they want to stay with you, then that's their choice. But if they through hearing it and seeing it, decide that, you know what, I think I can elect to go do something differently as it pertains to my spiritual walk, then be okay with that. Now, for some it's going to be a process, because to undo all of that, we're talking about 2,000 years of stuff of indoctrination, and the better part for the last 400 to 500 years for our people, through fear, through torment, and through genocide, through gentrification, through all types of formats of
holidays.
Yes.
Holidays.
And all of that. So so there's a massive influence that we have to deal with coming out of that. And then, for those who, secondly, to find a safe space to where you can make that transition.
Before we jump to the safe space, I want to mention the three most underrated, but arguably the most powerful indoctrinators over Pan-African Black people. You wanna know who they are? Santa Claus, Prince Charming, and all those white women in those little fairy tales like Snow
Yeah.
White, Cinderella, the girl with the bears, Goldilocks, those three. Santa Claus,
Right.
Prince Charming, and the white woman and the rest of them. And I'm gonna tell you why. Santa Claus is your savior. You need to be good, and Santa Claus is gonna give you whatever you want. He's a jolly old white man. You can trust him, and he's gonna give you what your parents can't give you. Okay, that's him. Prince Charming. Prince Charming is your savior. Prince Charming, it doesn't matter what's happening. Prince Charming is like 6 feet tall. He's slim. He's got good looks. He's white. He has blonde hair and blue eyes. And no matter what's happening, Prince Charming is going to find you and save you. And then the third one is the proverbial white woman in these fairy tales. Goldilocks, Cinderella,
Right.
and all of them. She's dainty. She's beautiful. She's white. She's got blonde hair. She's got blue eyes. She's thin. And she's always the beautiful one. And when do you learn about those three people? So early on in your life, you don't remember not having them in your life. Fairy tales is the entry point into brainwashing you.
Yeah.
Because they're one of your first thoughts. Now, my parents gave me all the black that they had to give me. My parents never in my life has a fairy tale been read to me. Period. That's why I don't know all their names. But I know enough of the stories, which goes to show you how a part of American culture it is. The second one is Santa Claus. My parents told me so early on that Santa Claus did not exist. I don't remember them even telling me that. I always knew Santa Claus wasn't real. And the third thing was they told me Jesus was black, and that the first people on the planet were black, and that when they describe Jesus as white, that's a lie. So those are early memories. I don't even remember them telling me that. That's how early they were. So you got some people who over here getting a story at 3, and then it sinks into your subconscious every single night. It sinks into your subconscious. You know what sank into my subconscious? Jesus was black. The first people were black. Santa Claus ain't real. And we ain't doing no Cinderella. You know what I'm saying? And I had to come to terms with that because people really hold on to these iconographic characters, and I don't mean to be demeaning to say the word character. I just can't think of another word right now. And I'm like, that ain't true. Let it go. But other people, that stuff means stuff to people, like Ruth in the Bible. I've heard people talk about Ruth. Like Ruth they think she was a real person. And they talk about these people and their characters, and they're older black people. And I sit and I listen to my people talk about them. And I don't say anything because it's like, wow, can you give me those verses again in Proverbs? And guys, listen, I'm going to post some of the references that we made here with Proverbs and the minimum. And if there's anything else that we had discussed, I'm gonna, so that if you didn't catch it verbally, I'll post it over the flyer like I always do. Okay. So what were those verses in Proverbs?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let me go back to it here.
Okay.
It's Proverbs chapter 22, 17 through 18. They're liking that to a minimum Wisdom 3, 9 through 10, because they try to break it down almost like scriptures and verses with a minimum. But
Wisdom, what was it? Wisdom what?
I think wisdom number 3 with a minimum.
Wisdom 3. Okay. This way. Okay.
Then there's Proverbs. There's Proverbs 18 through 19 and 21.
18 chapters. I'm sorry. What was the chapter?
Yes, it's chapters. It's Proverbs 8, chapter 18
Chapter
through 19
18,
and chapter 21.
18, 19. Okay.
And you may see the similarities with that in a minimal, also in a minimal because in the Hosea it's broken down like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so forth. So they had it broken down in a minimal, the third stanza. So Proverbs.
So Proverbs 18, 19, and 21 is a minimum. Which a minimum is that? Is it still Wisdom 3?
Wisdom 3, correct.
Okay. And I should have brought my Hosea for this, but that's okay. All right, there we go. And honestly, you guys, you can Google this. Google be telling everybody's business. Google be like, here it is. So you can Google this.
Right. Because if you don't have the Hosea, and if you haven't read the Book of Proverbs, you'll see, and you have people that try to argue, well, because you can't just argue it from from a similarity standpoint, because the comparative analysis in the region, they were borrowing from everybody. Well, I mean, you have pastors now that are eerily concerned about the Hammurabi Code because it's about I think about a couple hundred years or 1,000 years before some of the laws in Genesis. So when they're comparing them and they're looking at them, they're like, uh-oh. I listened to a conversation, these two prominent pastors, and he's like, the one was like, man, I'm looking at the Hammurabi Code, and I'm like, wow, this, we got some explaining to do. But they would really trip if they read the Athra Hasis and compared that to the story of Noah as well. And the Athra Hasis is, I think, 1,000 years before.
How do you spell that? Athra?
I think the Athra is ALTHRA Hasis. I think it's IS. I want to say it's HIS IE or IA or something like that. I'll get it correct.
And you said this predates
it predates the story of Noah by 1,000 years, because you have the I'm sorry, by 2,000, because you have the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is 1,000 years before Noah, and then you have the Athra Hasis, which, if you read that, it's the same. It's almost word for word with the story, where in the Athra Hasis, the servant was told to build a craft.
Stop it.
I kid you not.
This is so black right here.
When I read it, it blew me. I'm like, damn. I mean, it's like, come on now. And then, but when people don't have access to information like that, and then you bring that to them and say, well, you need to check your story of Noah. See, because the story of Noah is very pivotal to the transition of doing away with the past. Is very pivotal, because that's how you wipe out, to try to take care of a lot of the older history, even when we start dating back to 5,000 years of civilization before the European even got on the scene. You can easily do away with that with a flood story.
Right.
And so what's telling with that is that in order to do that, now you have to try to make sure you cover your tracks, because now if you set the precedent going forward, you can rewrite everything. Now you can introduce You can put people here and there in history. That's it right there. Thank you, Sin Olivia. Thank you. And so that information is very telling, because it's like, once you read that, for those who are open-minded and can receive that, and you're no longer trying to be beholden to your either organizational slant, your doctrinal belief,
or your fear.
Exactly. That's primary. I mean, you're trying to hold on to your fear, then for me, learning these things, and what I've been learning in this journey of particularly with the Kemetic spirituality, has been comforting.
Oh my goodness, it sure has.
For me,
it's been reaffirming that I ain't crazy, and that you know what I'm saying. Yes. I don't know. Garrick is frozen. He's frozen on my
It's been
end.
A place to set my feet foundationally on, and not be afraid, because some of that stuff was still in the back of my mind. Like, man, especially particularly the way you're taught, because it's fear based.
It's fear based.
And that's the thing that they'll never admit to, is that no matter how sweetly they try to put it, no matter how lovingly they try to put it, it's still a scare tactic in order to get you to believe a certain way.
Yep. And the cold part about it is this: the Christianity is what keeps a lot of Black people in too much of a slumber for Black liberation.
Yes.
It's like, ultimately, the goal isn't for Black people to even be Christian. It's to keep us in a slumber so we won't have Black liberation. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And it's my opinion.
Yeah, I remember a quote from Malcolm. He said this. He said that I can't serve any God that will not allow me to serve my people. He said, any God that won't allow you to serve your people, you need to do away with them. And a lot of the ethics of the Christian movement, particularly when it comes to for Black liberation, they're not going to have no part of that. Or you'll find some far in between that'll like kind of join the outskirts of it, because they're trying to maintain their Blackness,
or the optics of such.
Or exactly,
they're trying to maintain the optics.
Exactly. And but to be fully committed, you have to do away with some of the Christian thinking.
You do. And sometimes you meet people who have taken out the Christian doctrine and put in Kemetic or African spiritual doctrine or any other type of doctrine, but the structure of Christianity is still there and so evident and apparent. And it's because it's not just, you have to knock the whole house down just because you took the preacher out and you gutted the walls. You need to take the whole, you gotta get rid of the whole house.
Yes.
Either you moved or you didn't move. Is that still your address? Just because you changed up a couch here and there doesn't mean that it's a different place.
Right.
Yeah. And you encounter that. This is something that personally, it would be great. And this is probably a little bit of being ideology or idealistic, I should say, idealistic, is for people to find spaces that allow them to get information the way they need it. Listen, if somebody had sat me down at 8 and been like, boom, 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 I'd have been like, okay, that makes sense. Pastor so-and-so said this, and she proved it. You answered my question with a lie. You got something to say? At 8 years old, I know I would have said that respectfully, because I would have been like, this person said this and this and that, because I was always taught to, think critically and use your mind. We need to create space for people like you and me who just want it straight. And then people who do need a bit of a buffer, some time, who need some caring and all of that. Because we don't want to hurt our people. We don't want to hurt them, but just like you can't put your hand on the fire over the stove because you'll get burned, we got to still teach them. They
Right.
still have to learn. We don't have to scare them.
Right.
We have to get this truth, you know?
And I would even venture to say for some, find your space in some therapy too, because you might need it. Because depending on your support around you when you're making that transition and you're stepping away from something that you might have been born in, and you've come across this truth, and you didn't try to denounce it by demonizing the source or demonizing the message or demonizing the information, but you took it for what it is. I mean, as we were, when you called me earlier, and I was thinking about the first and only thing supposedly, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this. Our ancestors left everything in writing in stone. According to the biblical narrative, first and only thing that was supposedly etched in stone was the 10 Commandments.
Where they at? Where that's at?
And what's funny is that the idea, now according to the text, it was written with the finger of God, hewn out of stone. The first set. Moses gets the first set, according to the narrative. He's descending the mountain, and he hears this ruckus. Well, it's the children of Israel that left Kemet, and here he's in all this ruckus, and now there's the golden calf that Aaron constructed. There's so many questions laden within that story. It's very interesting for those who are not familiar with it. And because of that, Moses throws the stones down and destroys them. Well, God instructs him, to come back up to the mountain and said, this time you're going to hew the stone and you're going to write on both sides of them. Okay, so now this is the first recording of something that's being etched in stone that should be a memorial for these peoples.
Right.
Well, I'm mirroring the concept. So because our ancestors wrote it in stone so that we could never forget it, and we could be reminded of it, even though we may not understand the language. But we have some very brilliant individuals that are doing the due diligence to bring that truth to forefront. I find that interesting how you got this immediate parallel for something being etched in stone as a memorial for something that people should be able to point to. Well, the question is, where is it?
What's the Christian answer for that? What do they say? They haven't found it yet?
That's more than likely the answer that you'll get. Or, some of the things that now I wasn't, and let me be nice. I wasn't, I was tactful enough, I'll say it that way, that when it came to trying to answer certain questions that certain people would ask me, and I was tactful enough to know where I might have been beat historically, and because I can articulate, I would either request a space for time to either look it up and come back and we can have a further dialogue. But certain things like trying to explain how Moses, who wrote the first 5 books, wrote his own death, and then Joshua turned around and did the same thing, quite telling. You're the author of these 5 books and you wrote your own death?
That's what I'm saying. They don't have no answer for just basic, simple stuff. Like, you can't do that. That's not possible. How is that happening? Well, you have to have faith. I'm good.
Yeah. Or the thing is that because God is omniscient and
I don't know if Garrick is frozen for everyone.
And he's omnipresent, and he can take information that we that's aforementioned and bring it back to our space and time, and We just make all of these excuses as to, what really defies logic and common sense, to try to explain something that it is explainable. And we, and when it's simple things like that, to try to get somebody to answer the question to, how you do that.
How you do that? Yeah.
How you do that? I'm just trying to, educate me.
Right. Make it make sense.
Let
me ask you this question. There definitely were some edits to the Bible, and I want to kind of go over some of these questions that people have asked, because our conversation was really engaging. I didn't get a chance to see the questions. Questions were going by so fast. So are you familiar? Excuse me. Are you familiar with the Lost Gospel of Thomas?
Yes.
What is that? I've never even heard of that.
Well, that Thomas's gospel is, they don't consider it canon, because actually there's several books they don't consider canon, and that was one of my contentions as well, because traditional fundamentalists, Pentecostals, and Bible believers, if they really followed the church fathers, well, they would vehemently disagree with them, number one, because most of them were Trinitarian in their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional Pentecostals and fundamentalist Pentecostals, they were oneness believers, meaning they don't, when people who spoke of Trinitarian, they thought they were talking about three gods. And the way I was brought up, no, it's only one God. We don't believe the way they believe. So, but it would make them sick to the stomach to know, well, a lot of the tenets that you hold to come from those people that you vehemently disagree with, and your fundamental core values, you live it out to this day. So you owe them a lot of gratitude for what you vehemently disagree with them on. But anyway, the Book of Thomas was that was one of the gospels that they don't consider canon, because his story was the one he's considered the doubting Thomas. He was the one that doubted Jesus's resurrection, because he said, I won't believe it unless I see the prints in his hand and the prints in his side. Mm-hmm. So if you know the text, Jesus appears to him, and basically he confronts him on his stance of why he didn't believe that he was resurrected. So he appears to him, and he shows him his prints, and shows him the holes in his hands and the holes in his side. And then Thomas says, my God and my Lord. He now believes because he's seen it, quote unquote, firsthand, which would make him apostle. So he has this book that they don't consider gospel, because it doesn't align with some of the things that came out in that book.
Oh, these are just comments. This isn't.
Oh, okay.
Really. Yeah.
And so he doesn't. A lot of the things that came out in his book, even like the book of not Book of Jude, the Book of Judas. The gospel is Judas. They don't consider that, because the information within it tells a wider story of Christ and his behaviors and his movements. I mean, some of them have him having a relationship with one of the Marys. So they don't believe in all of that, because they're like, no, because now you're looking at your Savior as being human and an actual man who would deem to have a relationship, because your concept of someone being holy and sinless couldn't darely be involved with in a relationship with anyone. But
I've had that conversation with someone. To be brief, I have a friend who said he could prove that Noah's Ark it really existed. It was actually the day before we had our orientation for initiation, and I we hung out. But anyway, and we would talk, and I said, "So Jesus was a man?" He was like, "Yes." I'm like, Like you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "A regular human man?" "Yes." I said, "So did Jesus have sexual urges? Did Jesus masturbate? You said he was like you, a human man." He didn't have no answer for that one. He was like a deer in the headlights when I said that. People don't want to think about the sexuality,
Yeah.
sexual urges that Jesus must have had if part of him was human. We're human. Like, and that's number one. And number two, the fact that that's considered dirty is also a part of a Christian perspective, or an Orthodox Christian perspective on intercourse and just physical sexual intimacy. You know,
Right. Right. And it's questions like that that people struggle with, because now you're putting a person who, if for all accounts, if you read the text, um, really tries to reveal, and to express, and with my understanding now, in a more metaphorically, or in a more metaphorical way,
mm-hmm.
that 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 you the divine that you're looking for and expressing in the earth realm, that's you.
that's
And
that's
understanding all the realities of what you deal with in this human body that we're in,
that's
that's
right.
you.
That's you. The
So
divinity is within you.
it's within you. And there's certain passages that point to that. Greater is he that is within you than he that is within the world. um and things that point to the divine resonating in you. um and you are that divine having this divine experience in this earth realm. And that's sometimes that's really hard to grasp when
Hmm.
you've put the divine outside of you, but yet you'll say that the Holy Ghost is within you. You have it. You have the divine, your spirit, so you double talk
There's so much double talk.
big time. So then either you are or you're not.
Right.
It's it's
One or
it's
the other.
it's you so e- and because a few times that at least now we kind of talk about this from time to time, and just the whipping post rhetoric that you get laden with. You're a wretch undone. There's nothing good within you. You're born and shapen in iniquity. You were conceived in sin. All of this beat down to who you are in your divinity. In other words, you need all of that to circumvent, or it's done to you to circumvent, and how you need to come to a place of repentance. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So you're beat up that way so that you see how much in of a need of a savior you stand in.
I mean, they tell you you're born in sin. You ain't even done nothing, and you a sinner. I mean, like, so when did you become a sinner? Are you a sinner in the womb, or when you go through the birth canal? When you're out? Probably when you go through the birth canal, since they vilified women and the female body part
Yeah.
is horrible. So maybe the womb, definitely the vagina, when you come through the womb, the uterus, through the cervix, through the vagina into the real world, into the world. Born in sin, or is the world sin? I mean, so basically, by the time you've hit the earth, you're a sinner, and you have to grow up, be lucky enough to be in a part of the world where people are going to talk about Jesus, believe it, accept him, and then live a damn near perfect life just so that you don't have to go to hell. That's a whole lot of work.
It is. And that's and I like the way you frame that, because that's the concept. You come in, you already come that you already are taught that you're coming into the world in a deficit.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so as you coming in this way, you got so when they evangelize people, and you have to condition a person to think that's exactly what happened in their life in order for them to be yielded to receive a message like that. But if you have a section of people that were never conquered, never colonized, who didn't believe that, you can't preach that to them.
Right.
Because they won't buy into that.
Yeah, right. Because again, and they're also not getting these fairy tales at birth, indoctrinating them, earlier on. So yes.
Right.
That's ridiculous. You know what? I looked through all of these. I really didn't see any questions. I think people saw a couple smart Alex in the chat and put somebody in timeout. I didn't really see anything. But there is this question: what is the council meeting that determined which books would be included and excluded from the Bible? I have an idea of that, but just wondering if you could answer that question.
Yeah, that was you had the Council of Nicaea.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was the Council of you had the Council of Laodicea, you had the Council of Trent, you had the Council of I can't think of that other one. But the big one was the Council of Nicaea.
Mm-hmm.
in determining the essence of this Christ, but then also in some of those other councils that I mentioned. Basically, it took various councils for them to consider which books would be canon and which would not.
That's great.
Because do you believe it or not, the Book of Revelations wasn't supposed to be in there. I think it was 2 Peter was not supposed to be in there. I think in 3 John was not supposed to be in there, because they considered some of those books, particularly the Book of Revelations, because it was so abstract that people who were thinking in a common sense realm, they just couldn't vibe with it, and they were like, "Nah, that we ain't putting that in the canon, because you talk about dragons and beasts and things coming out of the earth, and it was all speaking metaphorically of a futuristic time." But see, for those who do honestly think critically about the canonization of the books, you would ask yourself, who empowered them to say which books?
Right. Exactly. Who gave you that authority? I don't know if Sen Garrick is frozen again. Okay.
You would ask yourself that question: who empowered them to where these books should be thus and so?
Right.
And that these would be the authority. So basically, I'm saying men decided that.
That's right. This is a human being, man, editorial, basically publishing company.
Yes.
At this time, these books are in. These are the books that are out.
Right.
Here's the product. Go use it how you feel like you want to use it.
And they did that on more than one occasion, because they ratified certain books. They ratified certain books, like I said, because the Book of Revelation wasn't supposed to be in this final canonization.
Mm-hmm.
But they decided to put it there. And my contention has been, since I've been studying that, my contention has been, okay, well, who gave these guys the authority to say that? Because you sure can't say God told them to do it. You'd be lying.
You can, but you'd be lying.
Well, you're right. Right. I mean, but if you're going to be honest, you can't say God told them to do that.
Right.
They did that based upon how they felt. or a lot of those ecumenical gatherings and councils, they were drunk and excluded women. I mean, there was misogynist, and please, I mean, come on. And that's what we have as a finished product. And you know, they took it hook, line, and sinker. And now people are you know, they'll go to war over this for you, against you, because of what has been put together. But you know, things are coming to the surface in the light of truth, where you can't deny it anymore. You can't play games with people anymore about, you know, forcing them or trying to fear them into believing a certain thing. It's not going to work. And the fact of the matter is, COVID-19 has done a hell of a job with the way, you know, some of these churches function now, and the way people had to rethink, you know, their whole thing, because there was this one particular pastor. He was so frustrated over asking the question, well, where were the prophets? You know, because if for those who in the type of Pentecostal rendering, you know, having a prophetic person, you know, who come and they speak prophetically, this, that, and third, you know, they'll declare, "Thus saith the Lord," and they'll say it in no English because it sounds more powerful that way. And it sounds more like God is talking because you say it in Old English.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so upset at the fact that why was there no prophets who told us that COVID-19 was coming, and that people would struggle financially and lose houses and lose that. He was so distraught. It brought him to tears, because he didn't have an answer for people who had questions to him. They're saying, why did no one tell us about this?
I mean, why aren't there prophets and healers in hospitals? The concept of death is a part of the life cycle in ancient pre-colonial African spiritual systems and African culture, and I would dare say in native cultures that existed on this continent before Europeans got here. I haven't studied that, so I could be wrong. What I'm saying is this notion of of death is a part of a cycle. And so separate from COVID, I'm saying separate from COVID, you know, when you have these people who say they're healers and that they can, you know, bring people back and that if you really could do that, then no one would die. Everybody would still be here. The natural cycle of death would not happen, of physical death would not happen.
Right.
And so it's just, you know, it's kind of telling that it takes something like COVID for people to say, hey, you know, we have people who've been sick and ailing and dying, and these healers haven't done anything about it, and these prophets didn't tell us.
Yeah.
So it you know, it just takes a good shaking or something to get people to see what's right in front of them, you know. So yeah, I have Council of Nicaea. I put up here, yeah, there's Council of Constantine, Council of Ephesus, Council of Chalcedon.
Right. Yeah.
These are all different councils that you should read up on, just to get an idea of how, you know, objective and decisive that these meetings were. Like, you guys know that Tuesday Talk is going to happen on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and you show up and we get the work in, and then it's over. And it's an objective thing that happens. That's what these meetings were like. That there wasn't this divine intervention that included all of these books that we have in the Bible and all of these customs and things of that nature. And more often than not, you've got ordained pastors who've gone to seminary who know the truth. And here is the ironic part about it. When you get someone like Brother Sen Garrett, like Dr. Ray Higgins, who've been trained They know the ins and the outs, the ups and the downs. They know books we ain't never heard of, like the Book of Thomas. That was new for me, y'all. People, that was new for me. When these minds leave and go to Kemetic spiritual systems or go to African spirituality, they come with all the cheat codes, y'all. Because I've had conversations with Sengaric, and when we have our shrine study session, I've had conversations with Brother Ray, Dr. Ray Hagins, and they be like in chapter and verse, chapter this and verse that. And they will give you what's in that Bible and then say, well, here it is in the Kemetic sciences, or here it is how it was played out in this particular spiritual iteration. It's because they went to school and they studied it in a way that we just haven't. So we have to kind of back up and fill in those blanks. Personally, I think it's very important to read the Bible, very important to know the Bible, study it inside and out, also to study these councils and these meetings that people had to create the Bible for what it is, so that we can, number one, meet our people where they are.
Right.
Meet them where they are. Have compassion for our people, because they are doing this in sincerity and they are living their lives in balance. Okay.
Right.
And the other reason is because so you can have the cheat codes to understand what has our people in such a slumber. What is in here that, like, if somebody gives you a cherry pie or an apple pie and you be like, this is good. You want to know what's in it, right? Because it's so good. Or lemon cake. Take note, people. These are my favorite desserts. And it's got the right kind of moisture, and it's got the right like glaze top, and you'd be like, I love this. You want to know what's in it. What is in this Bible that's got our people in such a slumber? We need to know it. We need to know it. What's the slumber all about? Meet them where they are. Have compassion, because we still love these people. That's still your grandmama. That's still your auntie. That's still your best friend. You know what I'm saying? So I personally have put this on my calendar because I really want to read it. As a Christian, I never read it cover to cover because I just knew it just didn't make sense. But now that I'm looking at it from the perspective of educating myself on what's got my people in control, I'm going to read it. Now, Septopia Black made a comment that I wanted to get back to. The Hosea is the book to have, but I tried to find all of them separately. What does that mean? The Hosea has a compilation of certain segments from different sacred texts, from different Kemetic sacred texts. It's like a compilation, if you will. All right. So if you're starting off, or if you're looking for books to get the Hosea. It will. I should have brought my Hosea down here. It will tell you the name of the book. Then it'll give you a passage from that book. Our sacred Kemetic text. Yes, thank you. Can you open it up so they can see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure. Let me get to it had the table of contents, like here.
Can you push it up closer to the so you can see? Like you see? I see the book of knowing of creations, the book of prayers and sacred praises. Then there's the book of wise instruction, Patahotep, something I can't read. I can't read the rest of them. But can you push it? Yeah. Patahotep. I can't read it, y'all. My bad. But the point is, it'll tell you. Or actually, Sengaric, you could probably read it since the book is right there. Why don't you read it?
You have the book of knowing the creations, the book of prayers and sacred praises, the book of the moral narrative, the books of the wisdom instructions, and that's where you see the Patahotep, the Kagimini, Kaheti, the Ani, Amenemop. So all of those, and you have the books of contemplation. The book of declaration of virtues, the books of rising like Ra. And so all of that is in the Hosea. that we have. And then you have that one, the instructions of Ptahhotep, part of that. So yeah, that right there, the Hosea, is very, very powerful. For I think it will be a good starting point for those who are coming out of Christian thought, but you're trying to figure out what material should you be reading, or where to start. The Book of Hosea is a good place to start.
Now, when I bought the Hosea, it was something so inexpensive that I don't even remember. On Amazon right now, it's $97.95. Why do you think the Hosea is $100? Make it harder to get that information, people. There's Abe books. Listen, after this is over, I'm going to put a list of bookstores, Black bookstores, inexpensive bookstores, and you might be able to find them. And if you can put an alert on a book, I would do that, because like, this is crazy. This is $100. It wasn't $100 when I bought it. Okay. So some of these books go up and down like crazy.
Yeah.
And so, just stay on top of your books, so that when they're, affordable, you can get them. Someone asked, is there a link to print in PDF form? I'm not sure. I really don't know that off the top of my head, but I would Google that. And because you'd be surprised what you can find, through a Google search. I personally don't know that.
I think I'll be able to, I'll probably be able to send it to you, Abusha said. Okay. I think I have a PDF copy of this, of the Hosea, that I can send you. And then there's I have a PDF copy of Let the Ancestors Speaks. That's a big one, that I think will be good for the viewing audience if they don't have copies of that.
Let the Ancestors Speak was written by Ankh Ra, and he's one of our African ancestors. He wrote that book. It's a book about the book on the Medu Neter, how to read the Medu Neter, etc. It's very important to have that book, Let the Ancestors Speak. I have that book. I printed it out when I was working at one of my jobs, and the book is like, it's a big deal, y'all. And so I would have to print it out like 10 pages at a time, 20 pages at a time. And then like, you would send the job to the printer, and people, what's going on with this printer? Why is this printer so backed up? And I'm standing there trying not to look guilty, like, because they don't know it's me, all this African stuff coming out the printer. It had nothing to do with my job. But anyway, I digress. If you want any of these books, please DM the Shrine of Ma'at on Facebook and tell me you were in this Tuesday talk, and I'll do my best to get it to you. Okay. So I hope that answered your question. I forgot to ask it because the comments have moved up. Someone asked who has the rights or whatever to the Bible. Once something is past a certain amount of years old, it's in the public domain. And if you get your hands on a copy of it, you can just print it out and keep it, and you're not breaking any copyright rules. Like if you have a copy of Shakespeare, anybody can get that and print that out. You don't necessarily have to buy it from like a company that publishes it. Most people do, because you have to have access to a PDF of it. Oh, you're welcome, Nikki. Yes, Nikki. So if you can get your hands on a copy of the Bible, just print it out. Again, DM me. I'll see if I have access to that. As a priestess, I know people who have gobs of PDFs, so I might have access. I don't personally have it, but I might have access to it. Okay, you guys? So I just want to say thank you guys for being here. Okay, Sinette Olivia said she can share the PDF. We'll connect. Girl, I have a binder too. We should get a Shrine book sharing club. Hey, we'll talk about that. We have to go back to I'm gonna end on this comment from Septopia Black. I like her name too. That's a pretty dope name, Septopia Black. We have to go back to the actual temples where this knowledge was cultivated. If you like hip hop, you like 90s hip hop. Okay. This past week, I was at a club. That's right. I went to the club, and Kid Capri was DJing, and Brand Nubian was there. Lord Jamar was there, and Grand Poobah was so dope. And I was in VIP because I knew the dude who was throwing the party. And like 90s hip hop artists gave us this information.
Yeah, they did.
Self, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they did.
Gods, what up, God? Like we can name all of these hip hop art. KRS-One, Rakim, Nas, Brand Nubian, Chuck D. Right.
Big Daddy Kane.
Kane, exactly. Yeah. We had it. And I did not know that knowledge of self was something on the temple walls.
I didn't either.
Got that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
These 90s hip hop artists dropping knowledge, got it from our ancestors. They got it from our ancestors, you guys. So when Septopia Black is saying this, and when we had all these hip hop artists saying this, Black Thought, all of them saying that back in the day, they got it from our ancestors. So what I'm saying to you is, get it from your ancestors. Get these books, read them, stay tapped in with us here with the Shrine of Ma'at and Tuesday Talk. And maybe we'll have a Tuesday Talk where we just go over one of the books, something like, I don't know. I just thinking of that right off the top of my head. Okay. But I just want to thank everybody for showing up and for keeping Tuesday Talk going. It's really a good build. And it's really nice that we have all of this. Well, he's someone that went past too far. He thought all those dudes were Muslims. So when you think about that, you look at the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam had a lot of influence, either directly or indirectly. And part of that is a couple of things. You learn the Kemetic sciences in the Nation of Islam. They teach it. And the second thing is there's this focus on building Black men. I realized in high school, I was like, I don't know if I want to be a Muslim, but the Nation of Islam will take a Black man in any place where he is in his life and turn him into an upstanding man. Okay. Yeah. So those guys who I was referring to were not, as far as I know, not in traditional Islam. They were 5%ers, the 5% nation, gods and earths. There was also another one where there's a 7 that's a part of their symbol, which I don't really know.
Yeah, the circle 7 Quran, where that's the 7.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what that means, but they're all up in that same space. And some people may not necessarily be affiliated, but they know the information because they're in that space. We're in that space. And you know what? I'm going to leave it on this as well, so that we in this particular space don't feel so isolated. We have Kemetic practitioners, African spiritual practitioners. You've got 5% Nation. You've got Nation of Islam. You've got the Circle 7 Muslims, and people who just have, what is it? Knowledge of self. Mm-hmm. The overlap there is learning about who you are as a Pan-African person and learning your history, your spiritual and cultural heritage. That is the overlap. That is the overlap. That's a huge, your community opens up so much when we recognize what we have in common. We have way more in common than some people realize. Okay? So I'm going to leave it at that. I see these comments are so on and popping.
Can I say this real quick?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This, and Rakim was my favorite artist by far. He was my favorite artist, and he says in "Move the Crowd" this one verse that I was like, when I got in the consciousness and I started thinking back about it, and I'm like, man, he was saying this back in the '80s. He said, "With knowledge of self, there's nothing that I can't solve. At 360 degrees, I revolve." Boom. There it is. It's like, basically, he's pointing back to yourself that once you got that, there's nothing
Nothing.
These bros, they were preaching in hip hop. I mean, it's like
at 20.
I'm like, brother Jay from X Clan. When I listen to it now and I hear him talking about Newton Gibb, I know what he's talking about now.
Yes, that's how I feel too. Yes. Oh my God, bring them back. Listen, y'all, I want to get them all on here. I'm gonna see what I can do. So we had 2 more Tuesday talks, you guys. 2 more. So come on back, and thank you so much for a very lively, fiery Tuesday talk. And I will see you next Tuesday. Peace to the family. Much love to the family.